and welcome to the 18th Annual Urban Leadership Forum. I am Jeannie Birch, the co-director of the Penn Institute for Urban Research, along with Susan Wachter. And it is my pleasure today to bestow the 2023 Lawrence C. Nussdorf Urban Leadership Prize to 4 path-breaking urban leaders from around the globe, and to then join them in a conversation for their work. This award recognizes leaders who are guiding cities towards a sustainable and equitable future. And in the course of the award's history, Penn IUR has honored more than 36 leaders, including mayors, state and federal government leaders, as well as civic sector leaders with organizations ranging from Philadelphia's own Center City District to Project Home, to globally focused organizations such as UN Habitat and the World Urban Campaign. As you will learn through today's discussion, today's awardees are exemplary leaders. They all share a passion for sustainable and equitable cities. What makes them so remarkable is their ability to address social and economic and environmental challenges by providing innovative solutions. Transportation that also addresses poverty. Climate change mitigation that protects the informal sector. Housing that contributes to a city's greater sustainability. And to deal with terrific crises from climate change as they occur. I will briefly introduce them and encourage you to learn more about them from your printed program. Steve Adler, welcome, comes to us from Austin, where he was the former mayor, and he prioritized mobility, affordability, climate change mitigation, and equity for all Austinites in his 2 terms as mayor. Manuel de Araújo, mayor of the Municipality of Quelimane, Mozambique. Now, you may not know much about Quelimane, but he's going to tell us a lot about it, and he's really an amazing leader. He's passionate about encouraging active mobility and addressing climate change, in particular, introducing bicycle lanes in his city, such that he himself was injured by a car in riding the bicycle lane. He's fine now. And he's an active contributor to such organizations as United Cities and Local Governments and ICLEI, both global organizations promoting climate change. Eleni, Lenio, Myrivili. She is the Global Chief Heat Officer for UN Habitat, part of the Arsht-Rock program in dealing with extreme heat. And when she's not doing that, she's the Chief Heat Officer for Athens, Greece. Very important place to be dealing with heat. And she's leading the field of mitigating extreme heat in cities around the world. And lastly, but not least, Sheela Patel, the founding director of the Society for the Promotion of Area Resource Centers, or SPARC. She is a renowned grassroots urban activist. And this morning it was mentioned she's probably going to be a candidate for the Nobel Prize. And for decades long, she has created partnerships with vulnerable communities living in informal settlements, particularly around issues of climate change and women and girls. In fact, one of my PhD students who is from India and very active in the Indian government said, the Indian government never wants Sheela there because she talks too much and says what we're not doing. So please join me in welcoming the awardees. And so you'll be able to recognize them as they come up on the stage. Here is Steve Adler, Mayor Araújo. Can we call you Lenio? And Sheela Patel. Please come on the stage. We have a logo and a motto at Penn IUR, which is understanding cities, understanding the world. And our speakers, as you can see, are from all over the world and will be representing common issues that we have, but their own particular and contextual manners, because that's what's going to take is local solutions In fact, the Secretary General of the United Nations has been quoted as saying, "We cannot have sustainable development or climate change legislation without cities. They are the answer." And this map that you're seeing their towns justifies it. And of course, it's showing you the number of events that have happened from 1990 to 2020. Extreme weather events, whether they be floods, whether they be storms, whether they be wildfires, whether they be extreme heat, whether they be earthquakes. These are the areas of the world where these things have struck, and we know in the future will continue to strike. And in fact, when we look at these things, this is data from a disaster institution, you can see the kinds of disasters that are being monitored around the world, and you can see in terms of the number of events that the floods and storms are something like 70% of those events. But when we get to the idea of what happens to fatalities, it is extreme heat which is causing the deaths, more than half of those deaths. And then when we look at what it's costing us, all of these things we need to be thinking about, we can see again that it's floods and damage that are providing those kinds of expenses. And it's here that we'll be dealing in cities that are the solution, because we're going to hear about some of these solutions from our speakers. We are going to start off our conversation with this question: how have you addressed equitable climate change solutions in your work? And we invite Mayor Adler to come first.
I just want to say thank you for the incredible honor of receiving this recognition. It means a lot to me personally. It means a lot to the team back in Austin, which I would parenthetically add is a city that during my 8 years in office, which ended in January, 3 times we had a storm that was statistically predicted to happen, but once every 100 years, flooding, and people died. That in a city where when I came into office, we were having historic droughts. Our single source of water reservoir was down to 1/3 full, and we were looking at spending billions of dollars to pipe in water from aquifers from East Texas. One of the first things I did as a brand new mayor 9 years ago is that in my second month I made it rain, and it filled up the aquifer. Had I known everything I was going to get blamed for over the next 8 years, I would have taken a lot more credit for that rain when it occurred. It's an honor being up here with the other honorees. Mayor, your work and your international leadership is exemplary, especially doing it in the Southern Hemisphere, where the challenges associated with cultural and behavioral change are so much greater without having the resources. And Lenio, the work that you're doing with international leadership at the United Nations, and seeing the change and slight in focus happening at the COP meetings towards cities and subnational areas is something that I love. So thank you for that leadership. And while I am partial to cities and to mayors, want to also say that it's an honor being up here with you, Sheela, because you have the title that is so much grander than being a mayor. You are a grassroots urban activist, and there's probably no more honorific title than that. This award is real special to me. You listed the people that had received it previously. Some of those are mayors that are friends and mentors, guiders of mine. So just a real quick nod to Shirley Franklin and Michael Nutter and Henry Cisneros, Martin O'Malley, and Mauricio Rodas, who teaches here now, are friends and mentors. Climate change is what we're talking about here today, obviously an existential issue, especially in a setting where you're talking about cities. It was an honor to be part of the discussions happening in Paris when the Paris Accords were signed. And wonderful time that the whole world watched. And what most people were not aware of is that same meeting, in addition to the 160-odd nation states that were present, there was the largest gathering of mayors in the history of the world in that setting, almost 700 mayors from around the world. And the reason for that is because half the work that had to be done as called for in the Paris Accords has to be done at the sub-national level. It has to be done in cities and in counties and in regions with the decisions that are made on land use issues and procurement issues. Certainly, Austin, my city, has tried to step up to meet its responsibilities and has set our net zero community greenhouse gas emission goal to get to zero by 2040. When we talk about what that means in terms of climate change mitigation, most of the times it's discussed in terms of what we will not have happen. We won't die. We need to do this in order to save the world, and that's a great motivator, fear. But I find that when you're talking to communities, perhaps an equally strong message is to describe what that number means in terms of what it can actually achieve, what you get, not what you avoid. It's all citizens and all residents that are enjoying the cool shade of a tree at a park in their neighborhood. It's dinners with healthy food that's grown by local farmers. It's all of our children riding their bicycles in order to get to and from school. It's cities that are affordable and culturally diverse, where everybody thrives regardless of race and income. We've tried to do that in Austin. In 8 years, our building emissions have fallen 20%, even though our population has gone up by 20% in that same period of time. Our water consumption has gone down, and we have a 100-year water plan. Transportation's a priority. Our community passed Project Connect, which was a $10 billion investment to finally create mass public transit in an election where our community voted to increase their city taxes in the middle of the pandemic by 20% in order to be able to drive this fundamental climate mitigation measure. Vehicle electrification, our land development codes changed so that by 2030, the carbon footprint of building materials will go down by 40% in our city. 80% of new non-residential development is going to be within city activity centers. We're saving 500,000 acres of local farmland. We focus on 5 key areas: sustainable buildings, transportation and land use, transportation, electrification, food and product consumption, and natural systems. While we're doing it, we're also focusing on doing it the right way. Because a green economy can be as disenfranchising as a carbon-based one. We know that climate action is inextricably related to public health and well-being. The way we live, the environments that we foster reflect not only our identities and our histories, but also stand for our futures. We know we will never come close to overcoming the climate change without centering racial equity and community leadership. And that means that the very essence of climate change mitigation response has to be centered on equity. It defines how you see the challenge, how you approach it, the processes and interactions employed to address it. It's the strategy and tactics adopted to deal with it. It's the why and how of implementation. We have identified in each of the areas that I listed, sustainable buildings, a description of why that's important from a climate equity standpoint that goes beyond just reducing carbon load. Sustainable buildings dealing with the historical inequities of where people live and what they have access to, transportation and land use, the historical drivers of unaffordability in our communities, transportation, electrification, again tied to history and systemically preserved burdens inflicted on communities of low income and communities of color. It is the concepts of equity and climate change mitigation don't follow one another. They are fully and need to be fully integrated within each other. The question, what have we done to deal with equitable climate mitigation? I'll address two, and there need to be so many. But in terms of engagement, we sought to ground our work in the real lived experiences of our community. We created Community Climate Ambassador Program. When we developed our plan, we did it around a Youth Climate Equity Council. We became informed about community concerns and priorities, and we integrated that mindset and instituted it. There were hundreds of people that helped develop our climate plan in our community that never before were at a table for those kinds of discussions, and it changed our plan. We also adopted an equity tool, which is appendix of our climate plan. The equity tool forces us, requires us, ensures that everything that we do submits itself to a series of questions that have to be passed on health, on affordability, accessibility, just transition, community capacity, accountability, and cultural preservation. Project Connect, which is that transit project I talked about, when you run it through that process, you end up with a plan where 70% of the affordable housing in our community will be within a 10, 12-minute walk shed of a station. It means that as part of the infrastructure plan that our community funded, they funded a $300 million line item, part and integral to the plan, to help fund displacement issues and affordable housing issues associated with that kind of construction. It means when you adopt a solar program in your communities, it's not only available to the people that can afford it, but you build community solar so that all neighborhoods can participate, and so that children walk through it or buy it on their way to school. I really appreciate getting this award. I appreciate the conversations, especially one that drives to something as integral as climate work. We adopted our climate plan, but we adopted it as an Austin climate equity plan, because those two things are integral to one another. They build on one another. They require one another. And I appreciate you elevating that conversation. I appreciate the work that's done by the Penn Institute here, and I appreciate the award. Thank you.
I failed to tell you that the mayor, Mayor Adler, was a representative of the United States at the COP27 conference, and I could see why we were so proud that he was there with John Kerry representing the United States and what cities can do in promoting climate change, mitigation, adaptation, equity, and the co-benefits of all of these kinds of programs that he's just explained for you. Our next speaker is our second mayor. Second mayor. Are you ready? He too was at COP27, but he's going to tell you a little bit about what he is encountering in his city.
Good morning, everybody. Well, it's really a great honor and pleasure to me to be here today with you. I think it goes without saying that I never expected that I will be here with you. And even though when I was invited, when I got the invitation, I was very surprised. And I accepted. But and then on the 12th of March this year, an extreme event, Cyclone Freddy, hit my city, the city of Quelimane, which is a 600,000 inhabitants city, the capital of a province in Mozambique called Zambezia. And this cyclone devastated my city, destroyed thousands of homes, left people without ceiling, and we were like 15 days without running water. As a result, an outbreak of cholera came, and now we are like facing malaria. outbreak. So for me, to come here was very difficult, to leave my people and be here with you. But I had to make sure that I thought that I will be doing a better job being here and telling that story than being there with them, helping them cry. That was one of the main reasons that made me come here, because I thought that by being here, I will be amplifying their voice, their suffering, and their pain. Thank you very much for inviting me. Quelimane city was built on a swamp on the margins of the river Bonj Sinai, and it's a coastal port city. Because it was built on a swamp, you can imagine the challenge we face with extreme events. Most of the times we face flooding from rain, and other times we face flooding from sea level rise. And this time, on the 12th of March, actually we faced both flooding from sea rise, but also flooding from the rain, which made the situation really terrible. Yesterday, when I was in the office, I saw a book. I haven't read yet. I make a confession. Mayor, the best job in politics. I only read the cover, of course, as I most of the times do of lack of time. And it says two things which really I enjoyed. One was like, mayors could never get away with the kind of nonsense that goes on in Washington. I don't know what is it talking about. But what I like was that he said, in our world, the world of mayors, you either picked up the trash or you didn't. You either moved an abandoned car or you didn't. You either filled a pothole or you didn't. That's what we do every day, and we know how to get this stuff done. I mean, I thought that yes, I believe that this guy was a real mayor. Because be it on the global south or on the global north, this is what mayors do. But I disagree profoundly with him when he said that it's the best job in politics. Actually, I think it's the worst job in politics. And I will let you know. In a country like mine, which got its independence in 1975 from Portugal, where even in Portugal there was a dictatorship from Salazar. And then we engaged into so-called Marxist Leninism kind of command economy. Being a mayor is not at all the best job in politics. And actually being a mayor from the opposition makes things even worse, because you have to fight and challenge the legal system, the institutional system, but also the financial system. So doing things requires a courage, a lot of effort. And I really dedicate this prize, first of all, to the citizens of my city. For the courage they had 3 times, because I was elected 3 times as a mayor. And on the 11th of October this year, which coincides actually to be my birthday, I'm going to run for the 4th time. I know here you have got term limits, fortunately or unfortunately. In my country, we don't, so I can run forever. But that's not my plan anyway. But also I want to dedicate this prize to my mom. She was my teacher when I was a kid, and she taught me to fight, even under this kind of circumstances. And I think that's one of the reasons why I keep fighting. Most people ask, but you were in London, you were working for Amnesty International. How can you leave a city like London to go back to a small swamp city, at the time dirty, to run as a mayor? You may be crazy. I said, yes, I'm crazy. So sometimes you need to be crazy to be a mayor in some of our countries. But actually, if I was given a choice, if I knew that one day I will be a mayor, I wouldn't have done my master, I would have done my PhD, I would have done what I did. I would have chosen a profession or a training as a firefighter, because that's what we do. Every single day, we woke up with a plan, and by the end of the day, you did nothing of what you had planned. Either there is a pump there, which is broken, you need to go there, or there is a pothole, or we manage crisis. And managing crisis should be in our terms of reference. When I ran for mayor, cycling in my city, to answer the question, which is there, cycling, or those cycling were seen and considered a third-class citizens. And I decided to run my campaign not using any vehicle using fossil fuel. So I used bicycle. And when I assembled my team, they said, "You may be crazy. How can you use bicycle when nobody cares about cycling in this city?" I said, "That's why I'm running. We need to change it." And we started implementing policy. Eventually I won the election using bicycle. So now in my city and in Africa and in other forums, I'm known as the cycling mayor because I use bicycles in most of my work. But also I campaign using bicycles. So kind of I politicize cycling. But by using bicycles, the way people looked at those cycling changed, because then the mayor was cycling. So it became a kind of fashion. And by doing that, we managed to bring into mainstream politics in my city those who were left out, the ones who are seen as third-class citizens. Actually, today in my city, those cycling, they are called the sons of the mayor. And one of the things that happened before me taking office was that every single accident that happened in the city involving a cyclist and a car or a motorbike, without exception, the culprit will be that one cycling, because in the conception of the municipal police and most of the citizens, roads were meant for those driving cars, not for cycling. So you shouldn't be in the street in the first place. That's why you are the one who causing the accident. So we needed to change that mindset. And I worked tirelessly to change that, to bring those left out into the mainstream politics and make them the owners also of the city. But this wasn't an easy task. Sometimes I had to take people to court because they were trying to undermine and to sabotage the work we have been doing. We also managed to put traffic lights. We put zebra crossings in the streets. And today, actually last year, we built the first cycle lane, not only in my city, not only in my province, but actually in my country. And my country has got about 30 million people. Imagine 40 years after, 50 years almost after independence, we never had a single meter of a cycle line, meaning that those not driving cars were considered, not only in my city, but in the whole country, as second or third class citizens. So bringing them from out of the politics into the mainstream politics, it was a fight, it was a struggle, but today I'm very proud of having managed. And actually, the current Minister of Transport, he announced that the capital of Mozambique, Maputo, is going to have the first cycle line. What a vindication. I really feel very proud, and I want to thank you, my good friend, for bringing me here so that I could share the story of my city. My good friend had told me that I could push something here, but I can't find it. I don't know where it is, because I just wanted to share with you, yes, what we went through, just in 3 minutes. That was a secondary school after Cyclone Freddy, that's how it is now. I have no clue where are we going to get the resources to change. All the roads after the cyclone, you could not drive and you could not even walk in the streets because all the trees that we have been planting for the last 10 years, and we planted more than 400 trees because we had a campaign where we said, one citizen of my city, one tree. But all the trees have fallen. And we can see how the first cyclone lane was invaded, but those trees did fall. That's another school. Those are like the houses which fell. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for sharing the story about the bicycling and these images. And there's another story I want to share with you about his life as a mayor, which he was engaged in a program to plant mangroves along the coast because of the issue of preventing flooding and so forth. And obviously the cyclone affected that. But even before that, his fight was with the residents in these coastal areas who were using the mangroves to build their houses for their fuel and selling them. And when he came to them and said, we really need to put these mangroves back, they said, what about our livelihood? How are we going to build our houses? How are we going to deal with these things? And he did have 12 model houses built in another part of the city. They were the only ones that withstood the cyclone. And I'm sorry we don't have photos of those. So here's a mayor that's dealing with cyclones, who's dealing with trying to preserve the mangroves, and cholera and malaria. It's a big job. I think it's the best job, though, for you. So now we're going to move to Athens. Lenio, please come tell us what's happening in Athens and around the world with extreme heat.
Hello, everyone. Manuel is a difficult act to follow, so but I have to say it's a great pleasure to be here in Penn, and an incredible honor to have been awarded the Lawrence Nussdorf Award. Thank you very much. It's amazing to be part of this great team of honorees and of all the past honorees of this award. It's really wonderful, and I would like to, following Mayor Manuel, to dedicate it to all of the, because basically working in cities means working with a lot of people. So I want to dedicate it to all the people that we've been working together and that have supported the work on climate change and have really kind of fought every day against a lot of odds to move forward building resilience for people in cities. So I definitely don't stand alone here. I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people. And I have to thank everyone. So coming to Philadelphia, I was thinking how to start this, and I was thinking of the path that I followed that led me here, and I started as an anthropologist. So I then followed an academic career, and I was a professor, and I taught for many years, and then there was a summer in Greece that was extremely hot, and a big part of my country was burning for endlessly, it seemed. Like weeks went by and it was just burning and burning, and then I decided to, because I was always working with NGOs and communities, but that was the point where I decided that I had to join politics and go into the political fight. And I joined the Green Party, and I stayed with them for a while and went to the leadership, and then it kind of got to, it was just too difficult. The politics and political parties are terrible. And then I read a book another book that was called If Mayors Ruled the World. And it was extremely inspiring, and I decided to run for Athens. And so I was elected in the city of Athens, and with a green kind of portfolio, and as a green. And the mayor gave me the position of being the chief resilience officer at the time. And we started creating them from the bottom up. So to answer your question, from the very bottom up, we started along with another 100 cities to do this work of creating a strategy for the city. And we did that with the people. So it started from the very beginning of just going to different communities, figuring out how to make sure that you speak to everybody and you make sure that the voices that are usually not heard are heard. And what did that mean for Athens? It meant that, for example, we talked with homeless people and the representatives that come in contact with the homeless communities as well. We talked with women refugees, which at the time we had all these big refugee flows go through Greece and Athens. So especially women refugees are really often people that our voices are not heard. I talked with people in the buses or in the subways in the morning that commute to work, because you often don't get to talk to these people. So kind of talked with several thousands of people and workshopped and asked them what is it that worries you and what is your vision for the city, and slowly build this kind of strategy. But I want to step back for a moment before I go forward, because then the heat work kind of started. And I want to actually say that I would like each and every one of you here to actually consider running for your cities. I think we almost never think about it, but it's really important, and it really made me, I learned so much from running for the city and for being elected in the city, and I learned how cities work, and I learned how I can make a difference, and I learned to love cities. And I really, really think you should really consider giving 4 years of your life or 8 years of your life, or finding a way, if you're not elected, to really participate more passionately and more actively with your cities, because we really need it. We really need, again, going back to the question of Jeannie, we really need to revive our democracies. And this is really important because, as the mayor said, climate change and democracy, equity and democracy and climate change are really linked. They're not different things. They're almost like one and the same thing. Because if we don't have democracies, we can't deal with climate change, because we need transparency and we need accountability and we need data-driven policy making. And unless we have strong democracies, none of these are possible. So I really, really want to urge you to go out and participate in political institutions and in cities. I mean, cities are like an amazing thing because they give back, because as soon as you get involved, you can see the results of your involvement, and it's really great. And I really want you to think about it, running for cities or participating in some program of the city. So I'm gonna go back and say that, so we did the Resilient Cities strategy with all of these people, and then the mayor thought, okay, maybe I should appoint this lady and make her a deputy mayor, even though I wasn't really part of his party. And I became a deputy mayor for urban, nature, and climate resilience. And that's when the heat, when I started focusing on heat, because it really became clear that heat was the main problem for Athens and for a lot of cities around the world, increasingly. And so as deputy mayor, you have some power to choose where you will do things, and that's when the issue of equity became really important, because I could push for example, the green corridors that the city was planning to go through the neighborhoods that were the most socioeconomically depressed. And we had a really, 20,000 people died in Europe last year from heat waves. And this is like, it just came out a couple of days ago, a report came out that said that 20,000 people died last year in Europe. I mean, the most affluent, the most climate conscious continent, and it loses 20,000 people in a summer, in a few weeks. And I have to remind you that even the most rich cities have poor people. In Athens, we have about 20 to 25% of our people are energy poor. So, you know, even they can't deal with heat, basically. Even if they have air conditioning, they can't turn it on. But anyway, so it's important to prioritize, and mayors have this kind of power to prioritize where to put where to put, first of all, the green corridors and the nature-based solutions and the water kind of based initiatives. I mean, the water planning, bringing water to the surface. I'm not saying it correctly. So we did a lot of things with water to try to make sure that we have backup systems with water, so that the green and the parks are not watered by drinkable water, which also uses energy. So we did. We started using an Adrian aqueduct that is from the Roman times, that we never use the water of it. Together with the Adrian Arsht Resilience Center, we created guidelines on how this water that is used from the Adrian aqueduct actually creates spaces and typologies in the city that lower temperatures. We use sewer mining, and we tried to use water from sewers in order to clean it and with mobile units and make sure that the parks are watered from that. So all of these things have to do with equity, because when it comes down to it and we have a crisis, it is always the poorest people in the poorest neighborhoods that don't get the resources that they need. And so water is one of the most important things that we will have to fight over, and we have to make sure that there is abundance of water for people to be able to drink and to cool themselves down. So we have to find backup systems for water. But also, anyway, and I'll finish with these things, because part of dealing with heat is not just kind of nature-based solutions and trying to make the city cooler, it's also to make sure that you address the most vulnerable and you protect the most vulnerable during the heat wave. So we did in Athens, we created for the first time, again with the help of the scientists from the Arsht-Rock Resilience Center, for the first time a heat categorization system that puts into the categories the risk to human life. So it's the impact of the meteorologic, of the climate kind of aspects is also shown within the category, and that was really important. And again, the way this is important because it raises awareness for people that need to understand how dangerous heat is, which we still don't understand. It's a whole different ballgame with heat these days. It's extremely dangerous. But also it was important to come together, and we did workshops with people that are the vulnerable communities to understand how do they get their information and how can we reach them with early warning systems. So we had workshops with the elderly people, with immigrant populations, with women and children. So we start to understand what is their realities, and we do policies based on after we listen to people and after we listen to the communities. And we also work with the Red Cross, which has a really good sense of and a really good contact with communities that are the most, also the most at risk. And so I'm not going to say anything else about this, but I just want to say again that I feel that the recognition of this award means that there's a recognition also for the cities fighting for equity and climate change, and especially for heat. And thank you, Ginny, and thanks the board for this incredible honor. And we go on and we fight on.
I think it's particularly fitting that we had the cry from democracy from Athens, correct? And all the wonderful things you're doing there, and the co-benefits of historic preservation with the Hadrian's Aqueduct, as well as getting water there, the variety of programs that you're able to institute in the city. So thank you very much. Last but not least is Sheela Patel. We've known Sheela for many of the years that she's been engaged in her work. She started out focusing primarily on informal settlements and poverty and so forth. But all of a sudden she realized, you'll tell us about that a bit, about the unity between the climate change and informal settlements and how important it is to work in this area. Sheela.
So Jeannie, my friend, thank you for calling me here. It is a tradition in my organization about which I'll tell you. Every time we get invited for anything in the global north, we have to come back with some deals. So I'm going to go back with many deals, some of which you have supported. So Jeannie and I know each other, I think now for about 30 years. We started meeting each other in various UN Habitat events. We played stereophonic roles. She from the university, me from Slum Dwellers Network. And we've developed many different strategies together, but I think now we're going to really mainstream them. So I come from a background of being a housing activist, working in Mumbai, the city in which I've been born and I live in India, which is a city which was about 12 million some time ago, and now I think is about 15 million, of which 62% people live in informal settlements, and about 30,000 households lived on the streets, whom we called pavement dwellers, in 1985 when I started my own organization. And we were a bunch of crazy women. I like that word. It makes you, it allows you to be gutsy and say rude things. So we decided that we wanted to start working with women. We wanted to work with the poorest women, and we wanted to take their agenda of their concerns and needs as the basis of the work program that we would have. And when we talked to these women who were migrants, who built their own houses and defended it against endless evictions, was their pursuit to find a home. None of us had any history of working with the city. I didn't know what is a development plan. I did not know anything about the city structure. But through the next 10 years, we learned everything about it together. And today I have community women who are now in their 60s and 70s who can tell you more about the politics of habitat in my city than many of the professors. So our work essentially lies in acknowledging that poor women are the managers of informal settlement, and that development rarely talks to them. Everybody who comes from outside, when they look for community people, 4 men come out and stand and tell you what their problems are, and they look at your suit or they look at your clothes and then say, we need you to do this, this, and this. But if you go to the women, they'll tell you, this is our problem, can you help us solve it? And that's the difference that even today a lot of development institutions don't know, don't operationalize or activate. So our organization did not ignore the men, but we started working in transforming our relationship with community women. And to cut a very long story short, it took us 15 years to use the data that we had developed very early, where we did a census of every single household living on the pavements, and we demonstrated to our city, to our state of Maharashtra and to the Indian government that it was a devastating failure of development investment by the state that produced this desperation of households to come into the city to collect scrap, which earned them more money to feed themselves and their children twice a day than it did when they were working as landless agricultural laborers in the rural areas. So to cut a long story short, we got that through. This work got us the attention of a national federation of slum dwellers, leaders who were living on large plots of land that they had squatted on, which they were defending. They said, we generally like to hate NGOs because they are all do-gooders who never ask us what we want and just give us what they think is convenient for them. But you guys are different. So we started an alliance of our organization, SPARC, NSTF, and Mahila Milan. And we created what is called a federation model of organizing. And today, this has been adapted, adopted, copied by another 32 countries in Asia and Africa. And so we proudly call ourselves Slum Dwellers International. And our work is to start off with defending informal settlements from evictions. We collect the best data on informal settlements. We can outbeat anybody else who collects data on informal settlements because nobody knows how to actually ensure that every single household is counted. And we have a motto, when in doubt, count. And we have challenged many demographic national institutions, universities, consultants, where we challenge them with our data and we always come out the best. The reason I'm telling you all this is that that is the basis on which we negotiate with our mayors, with our chief ministers, with our national government and globally to create a voice and agency for this huge population of people who now actually represent the majority in the global south, but are completely invisible in the planning instruments that our planners have learned from northern institutions. So in today's world, this is a very important issue to understand that planning with its high standards, when utilized in southern cities, becomes exclusive and removes the rights of lots of people from basic amenities and the right to live in the city. And Ginny, we have to look at ways by which your educational processes in such hallowed institutions learns from us and with us. One deal. So about, many of us talked about the Paris Agreement. I was dragged kicking and streaming by no other than the amazing Mary Robinson in a small group that she put together to produce the social justice elements of the COP, climate change program, because she felt represented cities. Now, I have had fights with environmentalists who feel that, like our mayor said, poor people always encroach sensitive areas where birds and other beautiful things are. And we always had a fight with people who were protecting the marshes and protecting the riverbeds. And we always were treated like the bad guys because we were the encroachers. So we had this antipathy to environmentalists. But then when the issue came to address climate change, we realized three things. The first, that all poor people have a knowledge system for survival, which is based on past experiences. And what climate science and climate change was saying is that that information is now dysfunctional. The climate has become so extreme that wind, rain, and sun come in crazy formulations and destroys our habitat, our livelihoods, and threatens us with new diseases and all kinds of different problems. So how do we accommodate this in whatever we do was the challenge that I had to take on behalf of my network. And that's been the last huge learning curve for me. I'm still learning. But what we found out was devastating. In the climate space, everybody talks about cities as the bad ones that produce carbon emissions. We consume everything, we destroy the rural habitat. That's the imagery that comes out a lot. And poor people are not considered at all in this equation. I've been to 3 COPs. Informality in cities, the challenges that they face, the difficulties that they have to deal with are discussed in not even 2% of the meetings. And I was told that the last IPCC report we should be very proud because in the summary, informality was mentioned 3 times. So my obsession with addressing the challenges of informality come out of the reality that the majority of the poor in the cities represent really the majority in the global south. And this number is going to double in the next 10 years as extreme weather will push more and more rural households into cities for survival. And cities are not ready for it. They are all going to come into informal settlements because that's the only place which can accommodate them. If the cities and its governance and the organizations of the poor are not prepared for this, there will be huge conflicts that will impact the cities. And we have not actually explored that area at all. So just like southern migrants when they come to the north, if they are not accommodated, you have new problems. So how do you do that? So today when I come here, I have met the most amazing people. So thank you very much for inviting me for this week in Peri World. I have made deals with many of you who are sitting here of looking at how we can work together. And I invite all of you, if you want to come and make deals with us. And I accept this honor on behalf of the millions of slum dwellers in the global south, in whose name I get all these honors because it's our aggregated accomplishments that sometimes I go and collect for us. But I think what we are looking for are partnerships, learning opportunities. We also feel that we have a lot to teach people about how survival transforms the choices that poor people make and how development and climate investments have to change the way in which they are delivered to poor communities. They are all tired of being consumers and beneficiaries of all the goodness that we think we want to provide to them. And we need new ethics, we need new rituals, we need new partnerships to make that happen. And I have come here on behalf of all of them to say that we are doing this with many universities. We want you to join us in doing that. And I want to thank you all so much for this honor. Thank you.
I thought Sheela was going to talk about her latest campaign, which is called Roofs Over Our Heads. I know. At any rate, she is going around the world and has assembled I don't know how many partners to work on getting better, more durable materials for the informal settlements, the tin roofs, bricks that don't melt and go away, working to find materials that will make these homes durable and lasting in the face of, she's now upset she didn't tell you about that. We'll send you information about it because Sheela will not let you go. At any rate, I'd like to ask Alan Schnitzer Mark Rosenberg, Melanie Nussdorf, and Susan Wachter here to come, because they are going to make the awards. Mark and Alan are the co-chairs of Penn IUR. Melanie's husband is honored by this award. And I'll get you each to choose which one you'd like to give the award to. So, Melanie?
Why don't we do them in order?
Of course. Go ahead.
You go first, Susan.
Do it. Something. Sure. We're going to get a picture, and after the photo, we know we have some questions, so we'll have the questions. Okay. Oh dear. Problems with shadows, okay.
She needs to.
Oh, all right. Sorry about this. Now, we promised if there are any questions in the audience to our panelists, who are getting their pictures taken still. Any questions? Yes, please.
Yes. It occurs to me, like I won't claim to know how they run governments out of the U.S., but you know, we have a federal, a state, and then municipal governments. It occurs to me that in each of these governments should have distinct responsibilities. If anti-poverty programs or climate programs are the responsibility of municipal government as opposed to state or federal government. You know, for example, if Austin has really good programs for the homeless and Dallas doesn't, or the suburbs don't, that, you know, those issues move into Austin. Even more so with climate, because, you know, the air kind of flows. What strategies might you suggest to put more of the responsibility onto the state and federal levels of government rather than municipal government?
I think that's for you.
I'll go ahead and take first shot at that. I think you began by recognizing the importance of cities, and I think that's true for so many of these challenges. And because we have so many cities, cities really can serve as the incubators for innovation and great ideas. It's the testing ground for solutions. It's easier to do something in a smaller area with people, geography, than to do something nationally or even in a state until it's proven. And that's why I think that the work of cities is so incredibly important. But to scale things, you really do need the state and the federal interest. But it often doesn't follow that way. In Texas right now, our state Senate and our state legislature just passed a bill that would preempt cities in Texas from being able to do almost anything that was not directed and guided by the state. So the questions of preemption, the questions of local control, the questions of that kind of collaboration and working has been turned on its head, I think, recently in our country, given the divide associated with partisan politics and the wedge issues that are being planted. I mean, I love what you said. I'll vote for you for mayor of Texas. But I think that's a real issue and problem right now in both providing the ability for cities to innovate as well as the respect for the city work and the scaling of it at the state and federal level.
Can I jump in? Thank you. Well, I think that it's very important that we understand the importance of each layer of government. National governments, they've got their roles, state or provincial, like in my case. But I think that there is an economic argument, there is a political argument, but also there is an efficiency argument to that division I call division of labor. The reason why mayors are always on the forefront of certain issues, I think I will just use the efficiency argument. Like, because mayors are elected by their peers directly, and because of the issue of proximity, mayors tend to be, or local governments tend to be more efficient in solving problems than central or provincial or statewide governments. The second argument, for example, I will use the example of my city last month, or even the example of the second biggest city in Mozambique called the city of Beira. The city of Beira was hit by cyclone Idai 4 years ago. And for full 5 days, nobody could reach Beira or could leave Beira by air, by sea, by road, or by train, because the conditions were such that no plane could come in and no car could leave because the roads were, were like flooded and the train system could not work. So for 5 days, it was the local government and actually the mayor who had to be on the forefront of dealing with the issues that were created by this extreme event, which was Cyclone Idai. In my case in Quelimane, we were only closed to the world for 3 days. Like, you couldn't get a call because all the lines of the 3 mobile companies were off. You could not communicate. Even the money that we had kept in the bank for such kind of situation, we could not use because there was no electricity, but we were there. And because we were there, secluded, could not deal with anyone, we could not get support, be from the national government, provincial government, or even from the UN or the international community. So there are things that those in the forefront, and actually mayors and local government, we are in the forefront of both climate change, disasters, and so on. So there are things national governments cannot do, even if they wanted, even if they've got the resources. That kind, so I think that there should be a clear distribution of labor in terms of the responsibility. Of course, there are things mayors cannot do either, because we don't have the human capacity, we don't have the financial capacity. because of the extent of the issues, like the level of destruction that both the city of Beira and Quelimane are facing. There is a role of government. The government needs to chip in, not to replace the local government, but actually to empower the local government so that the local government can be more efficient, both in terms of human resources, in delivering, but also in responding to these kinds of disasters. Thank you.
Thank you, and we've got people from the front lines here.
Can I add?
Yes, of course, yes.
Is this working? Yes? So I just want to add one thing, and you mentioned it a little bit. I think that, because this is a really, this is a question that burns us. It really hurts us, people working in the city. It's really difficult to get funding or to kind of make policies kind of align with the central government. It's a real problem. I was thinking to add that maybe bilateral institutions, like larger institutions, supranational, like, you know, maybe federal government connections with cities and EU government connections with cities and, you know, the African Federation connections, maybe these should be empowered and kind of more strengthened. And we were talking this morning about, for example, the loss and damages. And we've been trying, all of us have been trying to advocate for city role and city's role in all of these big institutions. But for example, loss and damages thing at the COP last year, it was decided who is going to manage it, even if they manage to get the money and put the money somewhere. Usually it's the national governments that manage it. Hardly it ever goes to the cities and to the people that really need it. So, I mean, this is such a crucial question. Like, how do we really get the resources where they're needed? And cities often are the places where they should go.
Thank you so much. Last word, Sheela?
I don't know about northern cities, but in most southern countries, the cities' mayors are from the opposition. You didn't talk about the politics. And that's a very big problem in the delivery of SOS emergency requirement things, because most of the dissent, this is a big challenge for all of us as activists. We get caught between the national, the state, and the local, because all the dissent is always starting in the cities. So.
Thank you very much, because you just said what I, thank you. I should have, because I'm an example of that, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you all, and thank you to the audience. As we close, I want to once again thank our Lawrence C. Nussdorf Urban Leadership Awardees for their inspirational words and their inspirational work. And I want to thank Jeannie for moderating this terrific session. And also a special thanks to the Nussdorf family for making possible this award, and all of our board as well for their support. Today we also have a pleasure of announcing our student awardees, the winners of the Lawrence C. Nussdorf Student Awards for their commitment that they've demonstrated to building our urban futures together by their work here at Penn. Two of our student awardees are here today. The third is a class, again exemplary. And I will ask the two to stand as I announce all three names. Please hold your applause until they are all standing. So today it is our pleasure to announce our awardees. Luke Campo. Nobody ever listens to me. Adam Pugil. And please keep standing, Luke. And Tori Sousa. And Tori, perhaps you would have your parents who are here stand as well. Come on, stand. We are so excited to be celebrating their futures as well as our exemplary, extraordinary leaders of today. So as we close, we are inviting you all to join us in future events. And the way to do so is, besides please pick up a box lunch, there are postcards, and you can scan them to link on to our monthly newsletter, the Urban Link, and learn about what we're doing. What we do is we attempt to understand cities and understand our world. Please join us in doing that going forward. Thank you.